I'm about to reveal 4 facts that will change the way you see God and His personality. Because let's face it, the way that you perceive God affects the way you perceive yourself and the way you think He relates to you. So let's figure out who He really is. Have you ever wondered what God's personality is like? I know that sometimes we tend to think that God is stern or angry, that he's rigid, he doesn't like to have fun, he doesn't laugh. And unfortunately, even because of church folk, you might think that God is judgmental. However, what I'm about to share with you is going to help you see who God really is. And when I started to see these things for myself, it completely changed how I viewed God. And I realized it also completely changed how I think He views me. So let's get into it. It's really interesting that the answers to your question about who God is are all around you. Point number one, the animals. Have you ever stopped to look at the animals? And I mean, really, 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 really look at the animals. Really train your brain and say, wait a minute, this was created. When you look at art, it tells you what's deep inside the individual who created it. So, how could the God who created these himself be uptight, angry, always black and white, boring, dull, or out of touch with what's cool or fun? How could God be out of touch with your desires? He clearly, from what we're looking at, had desires of his own. How much thought and care did he put into you? Luke 12:24 says, consider the ravens, for they neither sow nor reap. Like, you know how you reap what you sow. They don't sow and they don't reap, which have neither a storehouse nor a barn. And God feeds them. Of how much more value are you than the birds? If you're a creator, there's nothing that someone can tell you about what you created that you don't already know. If you are a poet, you write music, you make beats, you write songs, or maybe you wrote a book, you paint, you build, you cook, whatever you do as a creative person, there is no one who can pick it apart and tell you more about it than you already can tell them. They can't tell you anything new because you know every single paint drop, every smear, every alliteration. You know exactly where that thought came from, where that verse of the music came from that one situation that happened and it sparked something, or you lived the details of that book even though you gave them the character is another name, whatever it is. I don't care if somebody listens to it or reads it or stares at it for hours, they're never going to know more about it than you. And that's how it is with God. You will never know more about the creation that God made than He does. And I'm about to show you something that will prove it. Point number two, let's look at the stars, the hairs, and the fingertips. And I'm going to show you something really, really, really fun. So I have some interesting facts here, and I'm going to show you something really cool. I want you to see for yourself if you can count any of these, and if not, then maybe you'll start to understand how much God loves you. Scientists state that there are approximately 5,000 stars visible to the unaided eye, and only a few hundred have proper names. And fewer than 60 stars out of 5,000 are commonly used by navigators and astronomers. But according to the God who created the universe, Psalm 147:4 says, He counted the numbers of the stars and He gave names to all of them. That's crazy because only a few hundred have humans named and only 60 of them do they even care about. But there are only 5,000 visible stars to the unaided eye. There's billions of stars, and God has named all of them. Why? Because He created them, and that's how He feels about things He creates. Let's move on to hair. The average person has between 90,000 and 150,000 hairs on their head. It's safe to say that no one has more than 1 million hairs. So, as you can see, they're just guessing, they're guesstimating. There are 8 billion people living on our planet. This means that there are bound to be people who have the exact same number of hairs on their head, at least until the moment when one of these individuals decides to comb their hair and loses a few. So, as you can see, even the scientists are really not about that life of trying to figure out how many hairs are on anybody's head. They could care less. God, who created you, in Luke 12:6 and 7 says, "Are not 5 small birds sold for 2 small pieces of money? God does not forget even one of those birds. But God knows how many hairs you have on your head. God knows how many hairs you have on your head." Didn't the scientists just say there's 8 billion of us? Huh. Somewhere between 90,000 to 150,000 hairs, but they're like, definitely not more than 1 million. There's a big gap between 150,000 and 1 million. So they're trying to say somebody could have 500,000 on their head, but we don't know and we don't care. God said, "I know that there's 8 billion people on earth, and I also know how many thousands of pieces of hair that you have on your head." God cares about the birds, and He said you're worth more than many small birds. And I think it's more of an understatement because the amount of hairs you have on your head is a tedious thing for anyone to count. You would never do it for yourself. You would never sit there and do that for yourself. You love your kids to pieces and beyond, but you would never sit there and comb through strand upon strand, dividing hairs. You know, the famous saying, "Let's not split hairs." When people are like, that's too much detail. That's just, nobody needs to be talking about this. Let's not split hairs. God is splitting hairs. That's how important you are to Him. Pay very close attention to these photos. Every time you look at your hands and every time you look at that special, unique, swirly pattern you have on your fingertips, remember the God of the universe who created the swirly galaxies of stars, the swirling planets in space, and know them all by name. The God who placed a swirl of hair on your head is the same God who was in the swirl of the whirlwind that visited Job before he got better. Your fingerprints are specially given to you as a signet, a tattoo of the presence of God when you were created. It's a commemoration of how special you are to Him, no matter what the circumstances of your birth. Look how you are intertwined with everything He cares about. Jeremiah 1:5 says, "Before I formed you in your mother's womb, I knew you." Psalm 139 says, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place. When I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." That's how much care He took with you. So the next time that you see the stars or the sun, the moon, or any other heavenly creation, a rainbow, the clouds, just the blue sky, just know Romans 1:20. His eternal power and His divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what was made, so that people are without excuse.